Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be reading Chapter 3, Blood in Boston. It's going to be all about the very beginning of the American Revolution. Let's get started. Boston, Massachusetts, in early 1770 was a tense city, very tense. There were so many protests and gatherings that Great Britain sent hundreds of soldiers to the city to keep the peace. Instead, seeing so many soldiers in the streets only made Bostonians even angrier. Who do you think the Bostonians were? In late February, a crowd gathered at the home of a British tax collector. Rather than trying to calm down the colonists, an officer came out and fired his gun at the crowd. An 11-year-old boy named Christopher Cedar was killed. All of Boston was shocked. Even the royal governor of Massachusetts, a man chosen by the king, was outraged. A record number of Bostonians attended the boy's funeral. The sad event was as much a political protest at the time to mourn the death of the child. Okay, so here's a picture of the gun being shot. You can see that people are clearly very upset. But my question for you is, do you think that this was a good time at the boy's funeral to have a protest? Only a week after Christopher Cedar's funeral, a Boston merchant insulted a British soldier. The soldier struck the man with his rifle. In a flash, 200 Bostonians were at the scene. Then a few more British soldiers arrived. Suddenly, the crowd began to throw sticks, stones, and snowballs at them. When one of the soldiers was hit, the other pointed their guns and began firing. So we know that there's a lot of protests going on because of the tea tax. We talked in the last chapter about the very calm protests that the African Americans had when they were fighting for equal rights. They were nonviolent protests. What evidence based on this page here, that first page that we just read, do we know that this was not a civil protest at all? What evidence can you see? 3 colonists died on the spot. One was Crispus Attucks, a sailor of Africa and Native American descent. A sailor of African and Native American descent. Of the 8 wounded, 2 died within days. That brought the total number of colonists killed to 5. The tragic incident quickly became known as the Boston Massacre, and it fueled the colonists' hatred of the British. News of the massacre spread quickly. There were more angry protests against the British in cities across the colonies. In Boston, the royal governor promised a full investigation of the murders. Even he knew that the British soldiers had gone too far. So, the Boston Massacre, as this was called, were these killings done on purpose as part of the war, or was it a misunderstanding? And tell me why. 8 British soldiers were brought to trial for the murders. It is safe to bet that they were among the most hated men in Boston. Probably many colonists hoped that they would hang for their crimes. But the soldier lawyers were determined to see that they would receive a fair trial. Who was their lawyer? John Adams. Okay, here's a picture of John Adams. So he was going to make sure that all of the British and all of the colonists had a fair trial, which was also said in the in the Constitution, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Do you know who John Adams was? What famous document did he sign? This may seem surprising since John Adams was very much against British rule. And indeed, many Bostonians were angry with Adams for defending the British soldiers. But Adams felt that everyone deserved to be fairly represented in court. So he took the job, even after getting death threats. In the end, the jury decided that 6 of the 8 soldiers were not guilty. Only 2 soldiers were convicted of murder and executed. The trial made Adams an unpopular man in Boston. He lost a lot of clients and his family suffered. But right up until the day he died, Adams believed that he had done the right thing. Do you also agree that John Adams did the right thing by allowing the British to have some representation. Okay, so that is actually the end of chapter 3. Tomorrow we will read chapter 4, and it's going to be all about the Boston Tea Party. See you then.